Hey, grade 7, welcome to a brand new year and a brand new LuTube channel. We've got LuTube 7 available for you now. I thought it would be easier for us to put the grade 7 online flipped classroom lessons on one channel and the grade 8 ones on another. That way you guys wouldn't get them all confused and you'd have to sift through all of the grade 8 lessons in order to figure out what stuff you had to watch and learn. So we're going to start a brand new chapter with our brand new year, and it's going to be all about patterns and relations. And our first lesson has to do with describing patterns. So let's get straight to it. What kinds of things are we going to be taking a look at in our describing patterns lesson? Well, the first thing is patterns come in many forms, including numbers and shapes. So using patterns in math is a very important thing. Being able to find patterns and understand patterns and look for patterns in numbers and in shapes is very important, and so we're going to take a look at that as the first thing in this lesson. The next thing we're going to look at is how you can use a pattern to predict what comes next. That's going to be the big thing that you're going to want to pay attention to, is how you can predict what's going to be next in a pattern, what the next number or group of numbers will be in a pattern, or what the next shapes will be in a pattern of shapes. And that's something that will be very useful, and it's very helpful for you in math, especially grade 7 and 8 and into high school. And then we're going to learn that to describe a pattern, you need to say how to get the next item. So if you've got a group of numbers, how did you get the next number in that pattern? What was the pattern that you used? How did you figure out that the next number should be the one you chose, or the next shape should be the next shape that was chosen? What was the clue? What were the clues that helped you figure that out? And then the last thing we're going to take a look at is something that we're familiar with. We're going to learn that you can write repeating decimal numbers as fractions as well. And we've worked with repeating decimals, and we've worked with fractions and turning them back and forth. So that shouldn't be too new for you. Should be something that we're used to. So let's get right to it. We're going to start off with shapes. As it said, there are shapes and there are numbers, and those are the things we're going to work with our patterns. So let's start off with shapes. I've included here the page number in the textbook that shows you another example, so if you're wanting to check it out and read it over and have something to look at, page 372 will help you. But if you take a look at this pattern that I have here, you're going to notice that you've got a bunch of things. First thing hopefully you're noticing is that the pattern's made up of green triangles and yellow triangles. You're also hopefully noticing that there are a bunch of different figures here. Figure 1 is this one right here, and it's got 3 triangles in it. Figure 2 is this picture here, and we got 5 triangles in this one. Figure 3 is right here, and then of course figure 4. So there are the 4 figures. Each one has its own group of triangles to it. And so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how you can describe this pattern, and then we're going to predict how many triangles will be in the 5th figure. If I was to draw another set over here, and we were going to have the 5th figure, what would it look like? What kinds of things would be in it? How many triangles would we have? Alright, so what I'd like you to do is take a second to think about any patterns you notice here. Do you notice any patterns between the yellow and the green triangles? Do you notice any patterns amongst the figure numbers and how many triangles there are? So figure 1 has 3, figure 2 has 5, and so on. So take a look at those patterns and see if you can think of them. Give yourself a second to just kind of look at those patterns for a minute. Okay, so let's take a look if we're able to describe the pattern. Let's get rid of all this. Let's get rid of all this writing that's on the screen here. We don't need those figure numbers underneath here. Let's take care of that. And now let's take a look at our patterns. So once again, let's take a look. Figure 1 is right here. Let's just remind ourselves, there's figure 1, there's figure 2, there's figure 3, and there's figure 4. So if we're going to describe this pattern here, there's a couple things we can do. First thing we can do is we can look at the figure number, and what it can help us sometimes is to set up a chart. And so I got a chart here, and the two things we have is we have the figure number. So we've got figure 1, figure 2, figure 3, and figure 4, which matches up with the figure numbers here. And then in each figure there's going to be a number of triangles, and that's how many triangles are in each of these. So in figure 1, how many triangles do we have? That's right, we've got 3 triangles in figure 1. There's 2 green ones and 1 yellow one. And in figure 2, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 triangles. 3 green and 2 yellow. Figure 3, we've got 7, 4 green, 3 yellow, and figure 4, we've got 9 of them. So sometimes when you are doing this work and we're working with patterns, one of the things that helps you to figure out your patterns is to make a chart. Because if you're just looking at the triangles and the picture, it's kind of hard to kind of see some things. So if you make a table or a chart and you put the figure number down here, figure 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then the number of triangles for each one, makes it a little bit easier for you to see the patterns that are happening. Now there's a couple of patterns here. And we can see that the figure numbers are going up by 1 each time, but I mean that's not really a big pattern because that's just regular counting. 1, 2, 3, and 4 pictures. There's 1, 2, 3, and 4 pictures. The number of triangle pattern though here is what we want to take a look at. If we take a look at figure 1, we've got 3. Figure 2 now has 5 triangles, 7 and 9. So if we want to describe the pattern, we could describe it in a couple of ways. One of the things we could say, and here comes my handwriting again, so it'll be just like class. I'm trying to figure out what I'm writing on the board. We could say something like each figure, and you'll have to excuse my printing on this. There we go. Each figure has 2 more triangles than the one before. Boy, this is really lifelike to class, isn't it? So each figure has 2 more triangles than the one before. So if we look at the first triangle, it has 3. The next one has 5 triangles, which is 2 more than this one. And then the third one has 7, which is 2 more than the one before it. And then the last one, 9, has 2 more than this guy. So that's one of the patterns, that each triangle has 2 more, each figure has 2 more triangles than the one before. And if you really want to get fancy about it, those 2 triangles, you could break it down into 1 yellow triangle and 1 green triangle. That's our pattern that we're looking at here. So for this one, it's a pretty simple pattern. We're going to get more complex ones than this, but the basic pattern you're looking for is that each figure has 2 more triangles than the one before it. So that's the pattern. The reason why it's important to learn that pattern is because now you can use it to predict different things. So let's get rid of that writing again. Move over to our next slide. So how many triangles will be in the 5th figure? Well, once again, here's our figures, and here's our figure 1 and 2 and 3 and figure 4. And so figure 1 had 3 triangles, figure 2 had 5, figure 3 had 7, figure 4 had 9. And if we use our pattern, now we don't have to draw. This is where the benefit comes in, where it makes it easier for you. You don't have to sit there and draw all these triangles again. You don't have to make all of these green triangles, all these yellow triangles, and then add 2 more on. You can follow the pattern and go, well, 3, 5, 7, 9. It's going up by 2 each time. So the number of triangles in this one has to be 11. So that's how being able to predict the number of triangles by using a pattern helps you make your work a lot easier and a lot faster. Rather than drawing them all, which will take longer, you can just look at the pattern. And again, so like we said, if you take the figure from the one before it and you add 2 triangles on, you're going to equal to 11. So if I wanted to really get fancy and I wanted to go to the 6th one, well then I would go 11 plus 2, and then I know I would have 13. So I would end up with 13 triangles in the 6th one. So looking for the patterns, you're comparing the figure numbers and each of the shapes. So once again, in figure 1 there's 3, in figure 2 there's 5. So taking a look, well, there's 2 more triangles each time. As I add 1 more figure on, I get 2 more triangles each time. So as the figures go up by 1, the triangles are going up by 2, and we can use that to help us predict how many triangles we're going to get. So that's using shapes. Patterns with shapes. That's the first part. The next thing we're going to take a look at is describing a number pattern. This one's on page 373. And here's a little word problem for you that I pulled out of the book. And it says that Shana and Cade were changing fractions into decimal numbers, and they noticed a pattern when changing ninths into decimal numbers. So they took 1/9 and they did the math. They took 1 divided by 9, and on their calculator they got 0.11111 repeating. And then they did the same with 2/9, And they went 2 divided by 9, and they got 0.22222, and 3/9 equals 0.33333. So take a second, think about it. What pattern do you notice? All right, so let's see. Hopefully, if you look closely at the pattern, 1/9 and 0.111, 2/9 0.222, 3/9 0.333. Hopefully, what's the pattern? Well, if you take a look, because the bottom number here is a 9, because we've got 9s on the bottom here, the top number on the fraction is also the same number that we have repeating. So 1/9 is 0.111, 2/9 is 0.222, 3/9 0.333. All of them have a 9 on the bottom, and the top number is the repeating number. So what could we say for a pattern? Well, let's say for the first one here, describe the pattern. We could say something like, when the fraction, oh, let's make that an O, not a U. The fraction is 9ths. Then the top number, and if you want to be fancy, we can call it the numerator. The top number is the repeating decimal. So when the fraction is 9ths, top number is the repeating decimal. That's one of the patterns. So if we have 5/9 as a decimal, how would we do that? What would the decimal number be? 5/9. Well, let's use our pattern here. Since this is a 9 here on the bottom still, then whatever the numerator is, the top number is going to be our repeating decimal. So that one's going to be decimal 5. Now it does say use bar notation this time, so I'm going to put a line over top of the 5. So that means the 5 is going to be repeating. And now what about this one here, the last one, right? 0.777 as a fraction. So 0.7 repeating as a fraction. How would you do that? That's kind of working backwards now, because we had the fraction before and we had to figure out the decimal. Now we know the decimal, what would it be as a fraction. So I'm going to leave that question right there as our bonus question. You bring that answer to class and I may have a prize for you. In fact, I will have a prize for you. Everybody that gives me the right answer to that one's going to get a candy cane out of the deal. I have some candy canes left over from Christmas. And yeah, I know Christmas has been over for 2 weeks, but they don't go bad. So if you can come and show me how you would write 0.7 repeating as a fraction using the pattern that you can see up here, using that pattern right there, then there will be some candy in it for you. So let's take a look at what we learned today. So far, we've learned these things here, the key things for you to remember. Remember that patterns come in many forms, including numbers and shapes, that you can use a pattern to predict what's going to come next just by looking at the number of triangles in each figure. We saw that it went up by 2 each time, so we could say, well, each figure number is going to have 2 more triangles in it. To describe a pattern, you need to say how you get the next item in the pattern. So how did you get the 5th figure? How many triangles were in that 5th figure? And you can write a repeating decimal as fractions. So that's it. That's our lesson for today. Take a look at this, bring this knowledge to class with you. If you have any questions, please make sure you write them down or remember them and bring them to class to ask. And don't forget that bonus question, what would 0.777 be as a fraction? 0.777 repeating. All right, good stuff. Watch the lesson, remember it, and I will see you tomorrow.